The topic essay, transforming the railway sector to foster traffic migration from road to rail in Africa. Je crois que ce matin, on a eu une très belle session. Il y a eu un grand débat sur, je peux dire, la place du transport dans le développement du continent, mais surtout comment chacun de nous apprécie chaque mode. Et j'ai compris qu'il y avait une grande équipe qui est venue pour défendre le rail. Le rail, me semble-t-il, est effectivement ce sous-secteur qui a peut-être connu très peu de changements ces 6 dernières décennies, c'est-à-dire de plus d'indépendance. On compte très peu de travaux ou d'investissements ferroviaires qui ont été réalisés. Et pour beaucoup d'entre elles, les compagnies ferroviaires ont été décadentes. Donc aujourd'hui, on est dans une situation où on doit repenser, comme j'ai entendu ce matin par le docteur Luinga et le ministre du Burundi, qui a été vraiment également un autre avocat qui a beaucoup plaidé pour le rail. Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, on doit poser les jalons. Et je voudrais rappeler qu'en 2006, à la réunion des ministres des Transports sur le ferroviaire, il y a eu une grande déclaration qui était prise donc par les ministres africains et qui a été endossée en 2007 par les chefs d'État, qui était de faire du rail le backbone, c'est-à-dire l'épine dorsale du système de transport africain. Et là, malheureusement, bien sûr, on ne sent pas que l'épine dorsale est en place. On est comme sur un corps de mollusques, et c'est pour ça certainement qu'on est là encore en train d'en parler. Et donc, nous allons aujourd'hui repenser et reposer les problèmes à travers, n'est-ce pas, le grand thème ferroviaire qui est là, mais surtout celui qui consiste à penser qu'il ne s'agit pas de faire une compétition qui détruirait un mode en faveur de l'autre, mais de faire jouer cette multimodalité, cette complémentarité, parce que, comme l'a dit le ministre du Congo, qu'il y a parfois des situations naturelles que Dieu nous donne, qu'il faut utiliser rationnellement. Et donc, le rail est l'un des moyens qu'il faut comprendre compte tenu de la taille du continent. Je pense que le rail a un grand rôle à jouer pour parcourir les 8000 km de l'Est en l'Ouest ou les 12 000 du Nord au Sud. Je crois qu'en véhicule, les coûts de transport seront très élevés et je crois que c'est très peu compatible avec aujourd'hui nos soucis d'environnement. Et simplement, je pense qu'il y a beaucoup d'effets, je ne vais pas dire négatifs, mais en tout cas l'impact sur l'environnement, la sécurité routière, qui serait de plus en plus cher pour la population. Donc aujourd'hui, nous avons l'occasion encore de rappeler, après notre session, qu'il y a besoin, qu'il y a lieu qu'on ait un regard particulier sur le chemin de fer pour qu'il puisse jouer vraiment le rôle d'intégration, parce que c'est lui qui va apporter dans cette ZLECAF effectivement les moyens de transporter les produits à l'intérieur du continent et à moindre coût. Je vais donc inviter les différents panélistes. Commençons d'abord par M. Johan Miguel Villardel, donc de présenter, n'est-ce pas, le sujet de la scène aujourd'hui.
Merci. Bonjour. My name is Jean-Michel Villardel. I am partner at ALG. And at ALG, we are currently, I do not see the presentation. I do not know if it's going to be shared with the audience. At ALG, we are working currently on an ambitious study at a continental level, looking towards transforming the railway sector to foster traffic migration from roads to rail. And I hope that this 4-slide synthetic presentation overview of the initial results can fit with ideas to this panel. Sorry. Okay. Next slide, please. It's going to be five minutes time, not more. Just to show you an historical overview of the African railways, we can identify mainly three important periods. Colonial period that ends at the third quarter of century 20. That is characterized on the one hand by a lack of planning of the infrastructure development, and on the other hand of a subtraction of of natural resources from Africa to other continents. Afterwards, we can identify the post-colonial period in which it's characterized by a decline of the infrastructure and the rolling stock, and then because of lack of money, some countries decided to set up concessions. Some of them had a good result, such as, for example, the one in Cameroon or the one in Madagascar. Most of them had a fatal result. And currently, we can identify recent developments in the region at regional level. In East Africa, mainly, several countries and several corridors are developing SGR track gauge solutions. Some countries, such as, for example, Morocco, have already developed high-speed trains with success. And in some countries, such, for example, Senegal, have developed commuting services such as the TER in Dakar. Next slide, please. But the fact is that the railway sector in Africa remains undeveloped. You can see in the slide a map, a comparison of the density, the coverage of tracks in all the world. You can see that there is a lack of density, a lack of coverage in Africa compared with all the other regions. You can see that the transport usage and ridership in Africa is much less than other regions. And then the result is that the modal share also is not acceptable, should I say. I mean, that depends on the region. In the study, we have analyzed it in detail, the different regions in Africa, but in average, we can identify that only 2% of the goods, of the freight that is transported through the continent is taking the choice of railways, and in passengers, 1%. You can see other regions such as Europe, 18% in freight, Asia with 43% of freight, or North America 42% of freight. We have quite a path to go along, but I think that we are going to succeed. Next slide, please. So right now there are ambitious plans for the midterm. When I say midterm, I am saying 2040, 2050. At continental level, there is the high-speed development plan. At regional level, we can have, for example, regional plans such as the master plan in ECOWAS. And at national level, we have plenty of countries that have already communicated important budgets for development, such as Morocco or Nigeria or Ghana. That's some examples, okay, and Egypt. That means that in the midterm, only for infrastructure, there is an estimation, at least the information that we have, we got says that there is an estimation of more than $1,000 billion just in infrastructure. To this amount, you need to add rolling stock, you need to add security facilities, etc., okay? So, but the results are here. So we have developed a high-level demand analysis. I think that there is a summary of the executives. There is an executive summary of the study over there. It's not updated, so because of editing, we had to share it several weeks ago. These are not the figures that you will find there, but anyway, that's moving. But in any case, in the midterm, we are going to multiply per 2 the length of the tracks, and in the long-term prospects, we consider that we can multiply per 4. That means that the modal share also is going to increase. So right now we are between 1 and 2 in passengers, 1.7 and 3 in freight. That's going to increase, and we are targeting in the long term to 12, 21%, depending on the regions. Even in Southern Africa, we are targeting 33%, and in passengers between 6 and 13%. That would be a success, I think. But that's going to require a lot of investment in rolling stock. And as this morning somebody said, I do not know if there is enough capacity in the world to produce this rolling stock together with the rolling stock that other regions are requiring. So it's a big opportunity for Africa to develop capacities, industrial capacities to produce this rolling stock. If this pipeline of projects is completed, there is a relevant potential to boost. Of course, we need to break the financial gap, and also, and next and last slide, please. Next slide, please. There is a need that the railway stakeholders activate a series of key levers to bridge the current gaps on the enabling environment. So it's not only a matter of cash, it's not only a matter of investment, it's a matter of addressing the enabling environment. So here you have the 7 levers that we have identified. Some of them are institutional, regulatory, harmonization, interoperability, multimodality, capacity building, addressing the expertise shortage, putting emphasis on maintenance and on sustainable construction, identifying innovative new financing mechanisms, both for construction and operation, and of course, leverage the green benefits of railways and access to climate financing. Those are the levers. I don't want to take more time on this brief summary of the first phase of the study. Now we are going to start visiting countries. So we are going to go deeper in 15 countries to validate the hypothesis, assumptions, and to identify or to enrich the work that we have done. And well, I think that this is a good point to start the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. So let me ask now to my panelists some questions. The first one will be a common question. Let me start by His Excellencies. Growth and dominance of African railways is believed to be conditional of the migration of traffic, freight and passengers from the road to the railways network. What will be, in your opinion and experience, the aspects that have to be in place for the continent to witness this migration?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I believe we had an opportunity this morning to talk about this topic. This afternoon being a more customized discussion on the railway, I believe we will have an opportunity to put together what the continent needs. And for me, I don't think we may be debating on whether the rail is important or not. I think that debate is over. If we are to move ahead, let us agree on this starting point. It's not a matter of arguing, do we need it or not? For me, it is a yes. And if it is a no, I would not be in the right place this afternoon. I would cede this chair to someone else. It is true people are believing that if we build the railway, we will be denying business opportunities to road transport. I don't think it is true. And we are not inventing the wheel. We have just seen on the presentations, developed economies and developed advanced continent have got their railway networks which are very solid. And we know to reach the final logistics node, we all need the multimodal transport solutions. A railway may not reach every marketplace, every touristic attraction, but if we do have this infrastructure, especially for long distances, we are sure we will be reaping the economies of scale. So another consideration is when you look at the geography of Africa, it is a bit different from Europe, from Asia, where maritime and road transport can be possible on short distances. If we do agree that the demand on the continent is not necessarily on the coastal sides, on the seaports that we have on the continent, if we do agree that industrial parks, mining sites, agricultural zones are within the continent, and we know for sure, as we said this morning, it may be a bit challenging to have a truck running from Dakar to Addis Ababa. A truck carrying 20 or 30 tons. How many fuel would we be consuming? And is this environment friendly? No. And the dependence will only be increasing. I believe for us African countries, my appeal would for this session to really focus on how can we accede to a proper financing dedicated to railways. I think let's have this as the core of our discussions. Money is there, we know. And I told you for my country in the morning that the cost for no action, the sufferings we have because we don't have yet a railway, are costing us nearly 100 million per year. And 100 million per year over 10 years, it's $1 billion. It means if we do not invest in the rail, we will continue losing this money. But when I say we losing this money, it means someone else is benefiting. I think this is where the question is. Investing in the trucking industry, in the truck industry or road transport, it is too easy compared to rail. But in the long run, if we are to sustain our economies, it's a must. Why would I then, me as a country, be happy that, okay, I'm losing 100 or 200 million every year, and I cannot be happy. I would not be building for the future. So my brother, I think, and my appeal really to the African Development Bank and other partners, let us dwell into deep discussions. What is the proper financing mechanism for our railways? Because we know in the long run it will pay back. Thank you.
So, I had another question to you. Focus of the railways world recently has been centered around the extensive standard gauge railways that is being developed in your countries as Dar es Salaam. No. The question was for Mr. Messenger. So let me change. Standards and specification will have to be uniform for African railways for modal migration integration to occur. What aspects on the policy side will have to be in place to aid this lofty ambition?
We are developing a regional railway between Tanzania, Burundi, and the DRC. And before we even start feasibility studies, the countries came together and agreed. We came together with a joint agreement on how this would be run. Because we would not be investing so much funds in the feasibility, in the construction, if we are unclear on how the operations will be run. And the countries came up with what we called a tripartite agreement on how this will be done. And these agreements allow for seamless operations. It's not an infrastructure where someone will need again to stop at the border. No, it would be a seamless operations. And I think this is very important because we cannot permit that the bottlenecks, the non-tariff barriers we have been going through on the road transport be the same that we envisage on the railway. And I think these can be a model, as I said in the morning. Other countries can take this as a reference. We are open to share. We may need to customize here and there, but I think this is very important that the operations are seamless. And from the beginning, people need to be clear on this.
Thank you. So let me ask the same question to Mrs. Mesela about this first question. Growth and dominance on railways is believed to be conditioned to be migrated of the traffic, freight and passenger from the road to the railway network. What will be, in your opinion, Madam, and experience, the aspect also to be undertaken or to be in place for the continent to witness this migration?
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. Firstly, I would like to see a better migration in this forum, where at least 50% of the forum is represented by women. We can't be talking about a diversity and not mentioning it. Road transport is still largely primary transport mode in Africa. About 80% of freight is moved by road. And for me, it's not about who's dominating who, but rather about how do different transport modes work together. The rails cannot be in maritime, maritime cannot be in rail. So how do we then complement each other? But also critically important that we tell the truth when we come to these spaces, because our leaders are here. We can't have a development that is not people's focused. We have to have a development that talks to the African people. We have to have investment that is Africa focused. We have to have solutions that are African, made by Africans. We had talked about, financing actually came up earlier on. And the African Union, the 2063, talks about Africa finding her own development on African terms, I may add. Why are we still in the market looking for loans? Africans do not require loans. We need to invest in each other. I need to see an AFDB that does not give Transnet a loan, but rather gets equity from Transnet, because that's where the investment, real investment, should be going to. We need to ensure that once we have that migration, the manufacturing takes place in Africa. We must ensure that African content is increased on African projects. It cannot be a negotiable. It should be take it or leave it. We talk about rail master plans. We can't have different rail master plans. We're a single continent. One continent, one single market, one rail master plan. And our plans must be implementable. They must be backed by money. We should not be going around asking for loans. Money should be made available and ensure that our governments do not pay lip service. But when they link the people to the economy, and politics should not overtake that. So the integration of the continent, Chair, will be informed about the firm decisions that we take here today, prioritizing Africa, and saying that the move from road to rail, and for rail cargo freight, rail-friendly freight, it should move from road to rail, but at the terms and conditions that are defined by Africans for Africans.
I need the opinion of Dr. Lubinda on the same question.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very brilliant question, and one which actually provokes a lot of thought. And we're looking at two modes of transport in one question, road and rail. And we want to shift freight from one mode to the other. So inherently, we are being told that freight is moving by road in the majority. And so railway sector has to ask itself, what are we doing wrong, or what are we doing differently that we are unattractive, and what is making road transport attractive? I think that's the first thought which comes to mind. And to that, we basically then need to plan on how to get to be competitive as railways. And in the morning, I did mention the 3 areas on how we can get competitive. We need, as railways, first of all, for our railway policies, and I hope member states present here have railway policies. We need for our railway policies to be attractive and not to be owned by government, but to be owned by both public and private sector. The railway policy should not be a document which only sits in government. It should be one which, if it's at a price of $10 or $20, private sector should be able to buy it, because they should have the confidence of knowing that that document is going to sell a plan to them which is focused 10, 15, 20 years, saying these are the investment opportunities in the railway sector. Let's delve a little bit more in being customer-centric, because, moderator, we want to move freight to rail. If we are to be customer-centric on a particular corridor, we need to know what type of wagons we need to satisfy the customer. We need to know the level of security the customer needs. If we need containerized, refrigerated wagons to move perishables, say fish, we do not have to leave that to government. But government then needs to incentivize investment for private sector to say, look, we need 1,000 containerized, refrigerated railway wagons. And we need this to be supplied to the railway industry in this particular year, and float it to the private sector as a wagon bond. What does that mean? It means private sector gets to have participation. And this can be applied to fuel transportation. This can be applied to copper transportation, minerals. This can be applied to agricultural commodities. We need to incentivize investment for the private sector. Otherwise, if you leave it only to government, if you leave the planning to government, if you leave it not incentivized for private sector investment, then you won't get the investment and the customer would not be satisfied. Knowing your customer, who is your customer, that is also key. And we need to engage with the stakeholders. So that basically talks of enabling competitiveness. And also a second point, Chair, is what I called in the morning the railway ecosystem. What is our railway sector made of now? Is our infrastructure ready for the rolling stock? As private sector, am I able to get a loan and put it into rolling stock to bring on your infrastructure? If I have a derailment, does that economy have the industry to provide the spares? Is the infrastructure monitored? Is the statement of infrastructure so clear, giving me confidence of regulatory practice, compliance to standards? That is where we need to bring our infrastructure to. And Honorable Minister, taking advantage of your presence, we have transport parliamentary committees. We need a transport parliamentary committee, regional, focus, and also continental, where we have commitment from our political leaders and say in 20 years, you can monitor this project. You can monitor this railway infrastructure master plan. In 20 years, today we are here, this is the baseline. In 20 years, we'll be here. And this is the commitment we have made. With that kind of planning, then you have an ecosystem which supports your manufacturing base to grow. Because right now, if you issue a tender in the railway sector, your local suppliers are not going to benefit. They're uncompetitive. They are basically middlemen in the value chain. So their bid is always outpriced. Then the third point, Mr. Chairman, moderator, is one which I would really be doing injustice if I not allude to it, is now the transition to new models of operating railways. We have seen from the presentation which set the tone that the demand for rolling stock is huge. The demand for wagons is huge. So the business is there. Currently, what do we have? In terms of trade, freight, export traffic in SADC currently accounts for 95% of railway traffic. Import traffic only accounts for 5%. Intra-regional trade, negligible. That tells us something. So now, when we now look into the current modes or changing our operational practice, if we say concessions, who's benefiting? Do we have private sector, our private sector, African private sector, running the concessions? If we give a concession to Eric to run the concession in Rwanda, do we have a regulator, economic regulator, to make sure that Eric is not bringing 5, 6 firms to run the concession and he's just the front? Because he'll be running open access, shielded by a concession agreement. So why not open up the railway to open access, but importantly, have policy mandate properly aligned? You have regulatory mandate properly aligned. You have infrastructure management, which includes access rules, access code, clearly put. And then you also have arbitration, which is very important. An arbitratory institution to make sure all players in the market, be it the customers, if they don't get the quality of service by contract, they should have somewhere to go and get compensated, be it the operators. So, moderator, those are the 3 points. We need an enabling environment, an enabling competitive environment in railway. We need to make sure we have a railway ecosystem, capacity building in there as well, and all the enablers for infrastructure development. And please, let's work to stop installing railways. Let's construct railways. All our new railways are coming in a box.
Thank you.
We are reading a manual to construct railways. Thank you.
Thank you. That's why I have to move to the AU representative to ask him that the African we want, which is the project 2063, is a stable work of the Commission. Can you please tell us about its origin, work done so far, and what is left to do in terms of general program for this trip to Africa? How realistic is it is, and what are the issues and how are they being solved? Transshipment and interoperability are features that require detailed consideration. Kindly tell us more about these aspects.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon once again. Allow me, moderator, just to take 1 minute to answer on the first question, which was posed to all in terms of the
just
migration.
To have a problem
just
of
1
time.
minute.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you
just
one
1 minute.
question to everybody.
No, I just wanted to add that
Okay,
question
please.
before I go to the question you asked.
Okay. Please, you have
Just
3
to
minutes.
complement my predecessors on the factors on this migration, because this is a migration from road transport to railway transport. So I see it in two factors, mainly two factors. The one is to increase the demand in traffic volumes generally. We need traffic volumes generally in Africa before we talk of shifting from road to rail. So this traffic demand, to me, is going to be driven by two things. One is, how are we going to benefit from the African Continental Free Trade Area in terms of creating traffic among the major centers of Africa? So if we are talking of industrialization, how are we prepared in order to move the industrialization products from one east to west, north to south? So this will create demand in freight and passengers. And this will put pressure on the road transport. Then you see why do we need railway? Because we need railway for the freight movement for long distances. So first of all, we need growth in traffic. The second factor into this growth in traffic is to look at how are we able to produce the mineral production and manufacturing in Africa. Because we all know that railway cannot be economically viable without these other incentives, the minerals, the manufacturing capacity of Africa. The third important thing is, because we know that railway is a safer and more convenient mode of transport, how are our governments ready to sensitize for public transport and mass transportation in our cities? Because with the growth of the cities, with growth of metropolitan areas in Africa, we obviously see that in the next 10, 15 years, we are not going to rely on road transport. Railway transport is coming to support the public transport, the mobility within the cities. So how are we prepared as a continent to sensitize the population to know that railway is an environmentally friendly mode, it is safer, and it is more convenient? So these are the factors I wanted to add. And the last thing is the share. I think Dr. Rubinda mentioned the increase of railway share, the market share of railway as a sector. This needs to be complemented by regulations, harmonization of regulations. You talked about dispute settlement issues, standard safety, business models, harmonization of national regulation, and to change model shift and also adopt business models from the private sector that are going to support railway. So now, to your question on the African flagship projects, let me just respond it briefly, that focusing mainly on the railway sector. We have Agenda 2063, which has 15 flagship projects. As far as transport is concerned, we have two major flagship projects. That is the African Integrated Railway Network and the Single African Air Transport Market. The two projects are actually supporting directly the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, because these are boosting intra-Africa connectivity. So narrowing down to the railway, we have, I want to respond to my sister who was saying, we have very brilliantly saying that we have to have one master plan. So yes, we have one African Continental Railway Master Plan, which was developed for a period of 2 phases. The first phase has 13 pilot projects. Some of the projects, like the project Honorable Minister of Burundi mentioned, this is a central, the standard gauge railway project for the Central Africa, for the Central Corridor countries, including Burundi and the neighbors. And these projects at the horizon of 2033 to be implemented. Out of the 13 projects, we have 8 projects that have already moved from feasibility. They are now under construction and operational phases. And after that, we have another 59 links, which will total 57,000 kilometers by 2063. So what has been achieved so far under these flagship projects, or an African Integrated Railway Network? We recently developed, with the support with ALG and also GIZ, a railway source book, which is going to support the design, planning, and construction of railway sector. So this is anchored under the African Integrated Railway Network. And this is also supporting this recent initiative with ADB and ALG to develop railway sector in general. We developed norms and standards for interoperability. This one I want to pause it on it a bit, because without interoperability, without standards across the various railway projects, you know, you heard about the around 60,000 kilometer railway network built on the colonial area. So those railway lines are still existing, but now we are bringing in the more environmentally friendly electric railway, standard gauge railway network. So these ones need to be interoperable to the Cape gauge, meter gauges, which were constructed before. So the African Union has developed standards for interoperability so that the railway can, you know, seamlessly cross across the continent, so that you can move a railway from one country, one region to another. But how are these standards implemented? This is what we are working on. We are working with the association like SARA in their region to be able to really implement these railway standards. Lastly, I think this is what also my colleagues mentioned, railway sector reform strategy, which has to be coordinated with all the sectors. So currently, we don't have, for example, harmonized regulations when it comes to railway safety. We don't have harmonized regulations. We don't have harmonized regulations when it comes to the concessioning agreements. So each of the railway agencies are developing and negotiating in isolation. So we want it to be a continental approach in terms of harmonizing these agreements, concessioning agreements, safety regulations, but also what my colleague mentioned about dispute settlement, which is very, very key. When you bring in private sector and the public, it has to be this form. Maybe the last one I can say that this is still a 2063 flagship project. We still have some years to develop it, but without this belief that the 60,000 kilometers were built in the colonial era. How can we as Africa fail to develop another few kilometers to have the 75,000 that are needed to connect the whole continent? So I think we can do it with the collaboration with all the partners that are very committed. The bank is already committed, as you saw the initiative presented by ARG. The AUC is committed to do this. The countries and also the regional corridors are committed. So I think by 2063, we can really take this project forward and make it the best mode of transport on the continent. Thank you.
Let me invite Professor Marcelo, who has a paper on railway finance. The paper focuses on access to foreign funds for the development of railways in Africa. It will be interesting for the professor to explain the rationale for this approach in the first place. Secondly, how can Africa funds enter this domain and dominate? What could be the barriers and how can be scaled? How can they be scaled? Sorry.
Thank you, moderator, and good afternoon, everyone. So the study, I think there is a paper, but you can find online. The study was done by ourselves, the University of Birmingham, with the UIC, National Union of Railways, Roland Berger, who's a consultancy, and Alstom. And I just mentioned those because I want to show how much cross-industry collaboration works. And that's my first point today. I think if we're talking about collaboration, as my colleagues, all parts of the industry and the sector play a role, and we play a much stronger role when we do it together. So the study was on climate finance. Lucy from the UIC, who's here, will talk more on climate finance tomorrow. So what I will focus today is what the new perspectives that this study brings. And I think it's important because we wanted to shed light on other things rather than continuing the discussions that we have on finance. We understand finance is essential, but there are more perspectives to it that we should acknowledge. So I think the biggest point of the study to start with is when we realize the potential value that this new rail infrastructure could bring to the continent, and especially in what we call decoupling economic growth from associated emissions. Because research shows that for every 1% of economic growth that you have, usually in business as usual circumstances, it will lead to a 0.4% increase in CO2 emissions. So that means that you have a continent like Africa, which is growing really fast and it's growing far, and it's going to grow many percent of its economy. And what you were talking about decoupling these emissions is that how can you grow the economy as it's needed without the associated emissions? And railway infrastructure is a way to do it. And we found out, it's really interesting, that if the transport sector in low-income countries and lower middle-income countries, not only in Africa, across the global south, if the transport sector in these countries had the same emissions per capita as high-income countries, the world would be seeing 8.5 billion tons of CO2 emitted additionally per year. And if we bring back that value with this idea of decoupling emissions from economic growth, and that those 8.5 billion tons of CO2 have a value. And this is what our study was saying, because if you have this democratic principle that all countries have the same right as developing their society and their economy, then countries that do that without linking their economic growth with emissions, then they should have acknowledgement of the value that they're bringing to society. So, and that's the point. So let's bring back to the 8.5 billion. If we monetize these emissions, not only in all the senses, but just if we monetize those with using social costs of carbon, that there's a Nature paper from 2022 that put it at about $185. We are talking about social cost and a social value of those decoupling, the decoupling that we are talking about, of about $1.5 trillion per year. And people will say, but that's not realistic, but that's how much you attach to carbon. And in the long term, carbon is going to become more and more critical. So that's the idea that we have. And the value needs to be reflected in these financing decisions. Because the study also found out that railway suffers from bias. So most of the loans, they have a term of what, 25, 30 years? But the benefits of railway infrastructure, they span much longer than that. They span to 60, 70 years because the infrastructure will be there. And that is how there needs to be a shift in that perception of climate and the benefits of socio-economic and environmental benefits of rail infrastructure, in that decoupling that is so essential for the African continent in its growth from now until 2063 and beyond. And it needs to find a way of making use of different mechanisms. So the study also mentions that it could make use of the new Article 6 of the Paris Agreement mechanisms, or reassessing its own appraisal mechanisms on how we identify the viability of these projects. Because the main point of this the study was to show that it depends very much on the perspective that you take. You know, people say the railways are too capital intensive and they are too difficult to fund. But that's only if you use a specific lens to observe that. If you look at the long term, if you look at the social benefits, if you look at the capacity building and the industry promotion that you have, then the values are much different. And we should acknowledge that, coupled with the crucial and critical point of the value of saving carbon, which is the most pressing element that we have on the equation. So that's the whole point of this study. I hope I can talk to people about that, and you can read that online on the USC website. But low carbon infrastructure brings that benefit that spans much beyond the current terms that we are observing. And they bring something that we call in the study a global good, right? So it's Africa promoting something, saving carbon emissions that will benefit the entire world. So there is a value, this value needs to be realized for the growth of the African continent. And it should be treated as such. So thank you very much.
The last panelist is Mr. Radislav from the Motor Engine Nigeria. What are the plans and aims of your organization in the development of African railways, with particular emphasis on intermodal transport solution? How will this ambition translate to employment, growth, education, etc. for the African population?
Thank you very much. Thank you, moderator. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Today, Mota Injil is working in Africa for 78 years by now, and since then we have contributed significantly to multiple infrastructure projects, not only the railways, but the roads, ports, airports. We've done a lot of things, and we always promoting one very simple but very important idea. It is the development through investment, right? So when we are promoting, because we are construction and being a contractor is our core business, and large-scale infrastructure projects are definitely point of growth for us, and continent is providing many opportunities for that sort of projects. During the implementation of these projects, we see a significant shift in the life of the communities, in the locations of where the works are actually being performed. We can see a complete change within the 3 or 4 years when we build, be it a railway or the airport or the seaport, dry port, anything. People simply starting to live a completely new life. Let me give an example probably that is closer to myself at the moment. I'm the CFO of Mota Injil Nigeria, and we are building quite a large project in the north of the country. Is Kano to Maradi railway project. It's around 400 kilometers rail line. We started our operations 2 years ago. So 2 years ago we started the active phase of the construction. Since then we have employed already more than 2,500 people. Most of them are Nigerians. And the total impact on the local employment of the northern community is around 3,500 to 4,000 jobs that we have created since then. And well, I was there since the beginning, and this is impressive on how much the life of the small city of Kazaure, that is the place where our first site camp is located, has changed since then. So before it was a relatively small city, and today the life is growing and is boosting there. Another example is Lubito corridor that is going to generate 1,600 jobs all over. And this is all boosting the economy in the larger scale. So there is a huge external effect that is going on the local economy. That is the housing, that is the smaller businesses that are appearing basically out of nowhere because we need their products in our daily operations. And all this is creating further external effects. So the houses are being built, kids are going to school, and the population generally growing and thriving. But the economic impact on the community is not the only impact. The other important aspect is the knowledge transfer. Because, as you can imagine, it's not easy to mobilize 3,000 or 4,000 people to work in Africa. So primarily, we have to rely on the local community. And since many years, we were developing a system within the organization that will allow us to generate this capacity locally, because it's not the assets that is important. The assets is very easy to buy, very easy to bring. I mean, one way or another, we will deliver our machines where we need them to be delivered. But the people are a key to our operation. So what we do is we engage the universities and the schools locally from the beginning. So basically, the kids, when they are still at school, they have a chance to to do a training or an internship within Motengil, this program called Learn at ME, and then they have a chance to pass to another program called Start at ME when they are basically hired as soon as they are graduated from their schools. So these allow us, first of all, to raise our employees in the way that is the most efficient for our own operations. And secondly, since we are promoting the best practices in construction, we are allowing these people to grow further in their career. So they have a chance then to work in Europe, to work in United States, to work wherever they want, just because they learn the best practices from us. So that is it. So basically, we are, with our projects and with investment that the African countries are making, we are helping to develop this capacity within these African countries. Because, like I say, so our clients are not governments or not countries. Our ultimate clients are African people, the Africans.
Alors, nous avons un problème de temps, donc on va aller vite. On nous permet de prendre une question ici, une question par là-bas, à poser, n'est-ce pas, à nos très chers panélistes. Et j'espère qu'on va être très rapide pour que nous puissions inviter le deuxième groupe de panélistes. Donc, un volontaire par ici. Dans le fond, vous avez la parole.
Bonsoir à tous. Mon nom c'est Rémi Amavi. Je remercie monsieur le modérateur et je remercie les panélistes aussi. Je retiens de tout ce qui a été dit ici, que je résume dans un adage. Nous devons apprendre à vivre ensemble comme des frères, sinon nous mourrons ensemble comme des idiots. Où se situe le problème de l'Afrique? Nous sommes unanimement d'accord que le transport ferroviaire représente le transport du futur pour l'Afrique, qui va permettre à l'Afrique de pouvoir assumer pleinement cette nouvelle vision de la ZLECAf. Mais qu'est-ce qui se passe? Est-ce qu'au niveau de nos États, individuellement, les États peuvent assurer ce qui a le financement, porter le financement d'un développement ferroviaire au niveau des États? Je trouve que non, parce que je suis béninois et l'Organisation commune des chemins de fer Bénin-Niger est à l'arrêt depuis des années. Je suis résident au Mali et je trouve que les chemins de fer Dakar-Bamako sont aussi à l'arrêt depuis 2018. Alors, la question que je pose à monsieur le représentant de l'Union africaine, je vois qu'il y a un plan directeur, je note qu'il y a un plan directeur. Comment est-ce que ce plan directeur est vulgarisé auprès de nos États afin que la question du chemin de fer soit traitée de manière soit régionale ou de manière africaine? Merci.
La deuxième question de ce côté, comme ça on équilibre, voilà, et puis les panélistes vont répondre.
Thank you very much. My name is Motohiro Fujimitsu from World Customs Organization, which is the Organization for Customs Matters. I think you know, for example, HS code, which is developed and maintained by World Customs Organization. And its headquarters is located in Brussels, in Belgium. But I'm originally from Japan Customs, but working in there. And this is my our recommendation to our leaders in railroad sectors in Africa, that is the importance of advanced information for railway sectors. For example, as you know, many cargoes in Africa is transit. We cannot stop cargoes at borders to check what the contents of transit cargo, and or transitors to make transit declarations to customs at borders. In order to avoid this, the interoperability of customs information is very important. For example, the good example in Africa is the railway from Abidjan to Ouagadougou, where the interconnectivity of Sidomia in English, Ascuda, has been implemented. That's why the cargo information from Abidjan port can be transferred not only to the border Laraba, but also to Ouagadougou or Bobo Dioulasso. Then we don't need to stop cargo for the transit matters. The second thing is that this is also important for passenger matters. For example, when you go to London from Paris or Brussels, you have to put passenger information and send it to UK border forces. Then they check the passenger information and before arriving to London. This is very good way in order to control legitimate immigrants or passengers. So for future development of railway sectors in Africa, WC would like to recommend you to utilize advanced information. To this end, the interoperability of systems is very important. Thank you, sir.
Bien, on va peut-être donner la réponse par les panélistes. Je crois que la première question concerne le représentant de l'Union africaine. Et la deuxième question, on trouvera bien volontaire son Excellence qui pourra répondre à la question.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. Thank you for the question, and I think it's also more of additional input into our discussion. Let me just say that the Continental Railway Program. This is not something we do alone as the African Union Commission. We are working very closely with the regional economic communities. So we have established a railway technical working group, which is composed of the experts. First of all, we looked at the 13 pilot links. As I explained, each link has linking 3-4 countries. Some of them are within a corridor authority, for example, the Central Corridor, but others are also within a REC. So we have already identified experts and focal points for each of the 13 railway links, and then we have identified focal points from the RECs. So we have a working group which meets, discusses two main issues. How are these projects, progressing in terms of moving from different phases of development? As you said, you gave an example of the Dakar Bamako, which is no longer operational. So we look at the issues at the continental level, and then we set up, because some of the projects are bigger, you cannot discuss it at continental level. You need to have regional working groups. An example I can give is like the one Minister of Burundi mentioned about the Central Corridor. They put up a committee of different countries to meet regularly. So those are project-based working groups. But the continental working groups are very important because we discuss beyond the continental railway project. We discussed about the railway sector in general. We invite railway associations like SARA. They come and present on what they are doing on capacity building, for example. We discuss international partners like UIC, Union of International Railways. They come and present on regulatory aspects. So these are the platform, but we are trying to also sensitize countries to set up regulatory framework and governance of railway sector, because sometimes we even call and we see that some countries don't even have railway lead agencies, for example. So we need to also sensitize at a national level so that those continental working group can really support us in the coordination. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Lubinda.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to respond to the question from the Organization for Customs, which was highlighting the need for what he called advanced information. And specifically, he also highlighted the ASCUDA system, tax management system, basically, for customs, for border points, really. And in the SADC region, and this applies also to the COMESA region, For SADC, we have 11 railway corridors. And all these 11 railway corridors, just to give you perspective, I'll start with on the eastern part of the continent. We have the Lobito corridor, which basically has border points between Zambia, DRC, then DRC and Angola. And this goes to the port of Lobito. Then when you move down to Namibia, you have the Walvis Bay Port and Port of Lüderitz. And we have the Namibian corridor there, which moves from South Africa. Between South Africa and Namibia, we have a border there. Then we have South African ports going northwards into Africa, and that we have termed the North-South corridor. And there we have about 5 borders. We have border between South Africa and Botswana. Then we have a border between South Africa and Zimbabwe. Then we have a border between Zimbabwe and Zambia. We have a border between Botswana and Zambia. We also have a border between Botswana and Zimbabwe, and then you have a border between Zambia and DRC. So SARA in 2002 had to establish what we call a rail marketing policy. And for each border in railway, we call them interchange points. For each interchange point, we put a target of 48 hours of interchange. And what my colleague was raising there on the ASCUDA system, adverse information, is very important. But technically, I think we actually call it pre-clearance. We facilitate pre-clearance. And in corridor management, what we do as more or less mandatory for each of our 11 corridors, and I was going to move on the end to Mozambique, of course, with the port of Maputo, Beira, Nacala, going up to Dar es Salaam port. So all these have corridors. For each of these corridors, we have corridor management groups. And our corridor management groups are aligned with a management system, which we have stakeholders meeting in the first session, where we invite, for example, customs authorities, and we engage with these stakeholders. That interaction is very important, and the customs officers should not be alien to the railway operating systems. And similarly, the railway sector should not be alien to the customs operating system. Hence, that's why we are able, for some border points, to meet that target of clearing trains at interchange points within 48 hours. For some, it's a hassle. But the downside of it, and which needs to be pronounced, if we delay at these interchange points, imagine the wharfage costs for the shipping lines. So we really, just to conclude, yes. Railway corridors feed into the maritime. So immediately we are not making our interchange points efficient. We are making the maritime costs very expensive. And it's our food on the table at the end of the day which becomes expensive, and we are reducing our trade competitiveness. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, docteur. Monsieur le ministre, pour la dernière intervention avant le second panel.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be a bit short. There was a very almost embarrassing question from our colleague over there who wanted to know what is the problem with Africa. Why most of our railway are down and the operations have, are almost dead. I remember 15 years back, I was attending some of the meetings in East Africa with consultants from Europe and elsewhere, Asia. And whenever we would raise the need for Africa to have a railway, we were silenced. Everyone was telling us, don't raise that need anymore. Railways in Africa are not viable. I remember I was coming from Belgium where I did my studies at the university. Then I asked them, but these colonial railways, which were built 100 years ago, were viable. By the way, what was the size of the population of Africa by then? And 100 years later, they are not viable. Then from there I understood that unless there is ownership, unless there is leadership, unless there is a vision, unless there is championship in whatever we undertake, this dream will never become a reality, believe me. But since the time African leaders, some of the African leaders took the lead role to say, yes, whether the money comes or not, we are starting. It may take us 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, but let us go SGR. Magufuli did this in Tanzania. We are all witnesses. Countries like ours and others are doing that, and we are all witnessing this. It may take time, but I can tell you, it's like telling a sick person that you take tablets, they are going to reduce the pain, but for a week or two, and telling another one, someone in the morning was telling us about surgery. Do you adopt to go for a surgery that will give you life forever, or just taking tablets which just reduce pain for a week or two? What I mean here is that I'm very now happy that I was sitting in the right panel of people and experts believing that, yes, railway is the way to go. Thank you.
Je pense que la conclusion du ministre a été une espèce de résumé du débat qu'on a eu aujourd'hui. Une idée est claire, il nous faut du chemin de fer sur le continent, mais pour l'avoir, il faut qu'il y ait une véritable vision, un engagement et une volonté qui tout à fait transcendent, n'est-ce pas, toutes les considérations. Et pour cela, il faut bien un champion. Et je pense qu'il y a les hommes et les femmes, comme on a vu sur le panel, qui connaissent le chemin de fer et qui seront capables, n'est-ce pas, de conduire ce changement de paradigme dans les prochaines décennies, parce qu'il faut absolument que le futur marché de la ZECAF ait les moyens de transport les plus appropriés, sans concurrence, mais une complémentarité, tel que ça a été exprimé le long du débat. Je vous remercie, mesdames et messieurs, et applaudissez-les parce qu'ils ont été les meilleurs.